And joining me now, Utah Senator Orrin Hatch. He's the longest-serving current member of the Judiciary Committee and its former chair, as you heard the president say. Senator, great to have you on The Real Story. So what's changed now? Because you did do that floor speech where you said that Garland was a superior choice. What's changed?
Well, keep in mind, that was for the seat on the Circuit Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. That's a far cry from being on the Supreme Court. I happen to like Judge Gordon. I think he's a good person. And frankly, that's not the issue. It's not the person. It's the system. I mean, we're in the middle of a major toxic presidential campaign, and I don't want to see the Supreme Court dragged through the mud, and I don't want to see the Supreme Court mistreated. And frankly, it's inevitable for that to happen under these circumstances.
Today, that times have changed.
There's a whale of a difference between being on any Circuit Court of Appeals and being a nominee for the Supreme Court of the United States where you have ultimate decision-making power.
It's a political tug-of-war between President Obama and Utah's senior senator. Why Orrin Hatch says he won't compromise on a Supreme Court nominee.
Live from Fox 13 studios, this is Fox 13 live at 5:30.
It's not any person that we're against.
Utah Senator Orrin Hatch is sticking to his guns, saying the Senate will not approve a Supreme Court justice during an election year. Hatch is now at the center of the national argument.
Hatch and Senator Mike Lee, for that matter, both knew this was coming. Their argument against the idea of confirming an Obama nominee is now an argument against a nominee who has a compelling resume and life story. Hatch's argument, this is a toxic political year, the wrong environment to pick a judge.
So when was the cutoff? I mean, you're saying this is because this is in the middle of a toxic election year. If this vacancy had emerged last November instead of last month, would it then have been okay to try to fill the seat?
It probably would have. Now, to make a long story short, Joe Biden, when he was chairman of the committee, said in 1992 that a year before, he said you should not... that Bush should not be able to bring up a president, or the president shouldn't be able to bring up a Supreme Court justice during a presidential year. Harry Reid has said that. And, Senator Leahy, who was chairman of the committee, has said that. And the fact of the matter is, they're right. This is not the environment to bring up a Supreme Court justice. So they say that the Constitution provides the Senate's job description requiring a prompt Judiciary Committee hearing and a timely floor vote. There may be a Constitution somewhere that says such a thing, but it's certainly not in our Constitution.
Tomorrow, the Senate will take a 2-week recess, then revisit options for moving.
Frankly, yes, the president has absolute right to recommend and to submit who he wants, but the Senate has an absolute right to determine when that should be brought up, and I think almost all Republicans agree that it should be brought up after the elections.
Senator Orrin Hatch, who is an interesting guy to watch. He's a real institutionalist, so let's watch Orrin Hatch of Utah.
The Senate has never confirmed a nominee to the Supreme Court, to a Supreme Court vacancy that opened up this late in a term-limited president's time in office. This is only the third vacancy in nearly a century to occur after the American people had already started voting in a presidential election.
Seem right to you that this should be about the election process rather than about the quality of the nominee?
Yeah, look, the quality of the nominee isn't an issue. The person is not an issue. What is an issue is, should we do this during this toxic presidential election process? Because you've seen over the recent years, and the Democrats started this when they really destroyed Bork, who was one of the all-time great legal minds. We're talking about the highest court in the land, a court of final decision-making, where it's a court of final appeal in this country. So it's a much more serious thing, and I can quote you Democrat after Democrat who, when Republicans were in control, said you can't do this. And right. So now that the ox is gored, I mean, they of course would like to just be able to run right over you, and the Republicans aren't going to let them do that.
What you're actually saying is, no matter who Obama would have put up, the president would have put up, that now it's not an ideological thing about the person. It doesn't matter if they're a moderate or a far left person or even a conservative. It's about the timing of it all.
Well, that's right. In other words, we're in one of the most difficult, toxic ridiculous presidential races in history. People are fighting on every little issue. I just don't believe we should drag the court into this particular process.
Okay.
At this time. Now, there's a time when we can do this. And there's nothing in the Constitution that says that Republicans can't choose a better time than this.
If theoretically, if Hillary Clinton gets the nomination and wins in November, you might end up with a much younger and much more liberal Supreme Court nominee in front of your committee.
Well, that's the risk that you take. On the other hand, do we want the process to be right? Do we want it to be a sophisticated, good process with a minimum of politics involved, or do we want to just throw it into this cauldron that's going to cause the... And I can tell you this, if the table were turned and this was, and the Democrats were in charge, I guarantee you, Republicans had the presidency, I guarantee you the Democrats would not do anything different from what the Republicans are doing. It's not any person that we're against.
Utah Senator Orrin Hatch quickly firing back, insisting Senate Republicans have the constitutional power to withhold consent, especially during what he calls a toxic political environment with the current presidential primaries.
That decision has nothing whatsoever to do with the identity of the nominee. And the Republicans made our decision known weeks ago, before the president had chosen anyone. We should not bring up a Supreme Court justice and get in this big mess again, wrecking the court, during this really toxic presidential year. And that really bothers me. I mean, I gave a major speech to the Federalist Society, and it was interrupted by people sent over by the Democrats and even the president's group. They interrupted it and just kept yelling throughout the speech until they finally wore out. But this is the kind of stuff that it's two-bit stuff that they play on you. And frankly, this is a serious, important thing, and it ought to be put off out of this toxic arena right now and put off to after the election, and then whoever is president can make that determination, and that's fair to both sides. But I'll tell you one thing I'm tired of, and that is when it comes to the Supreme Court, we should all be venerating that court and venerating the people on it, and to put them through, even a good candidate through this toxic process during a presidential election, which really hasn't been done before in this way, I think would be a tremendous mistake, and Republicans just aren't going to do that. Neither would Democrats. If the position was changed, it was the other way around, the Democrats wouldn't be going ahead either.